I'm kind of surprised by the solidarity we've seen in the writer's strike.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that kind of solidarity in the previous writer's strike. Do you remember?
I mean, it's been a long time. I wasn't like on Twitter or anything back then, but yeah, it sounds like maybe the Screen Actors Guild and maybe the Directors Guild might join forces with the WGA and maybe do like a 3-way strike.
You know, the funniest thing I saw was a photo of George R.R. Martin taking part in the writer's strike. And people were talking about how he's been on strike with the Game of Thrones books for about 12 years now.
Basically, yeah. I mean, he's picked up weird little writing gigs on like video games and stuff, but
I heard Elder Ring is awesome, though.
Yeah, and he contributed stuff to that. I've been so deep into the new Legend of Zelda game the past month. Like it's
how is that?
It's fantastic. It's occupying all of my free time. It is.
I don't know if I have the patience for that kind of like really wide open game.
It's so wide open. It's like 200 hours, basically. You can go anywhere. They've doubled or if not tripled the amount of space from the previous game to like walk around in.
That would drive me nuts. Like I need something more linear.
Yeah, but it is kind of what you make it. Like you don't have to do all the quests. You can zip like right along to the end of the story faster than anyone if you want to. So it's kind of unstructured, but
I need structure, damn it. I'm like today's kids. I need to go from school to like violin lessons, to like soccer practice, to like like some sort of like healthy meal, and then some sort of like homework study group, and then repeat day after day after day.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe it won't be for you then. But
yeah, I mean, we're the generation that grew up with like a lot of free time on our hands, and I appreciated that. Because, I don't know, we just thought of stuff to do. Like, we were never bored, to my memory. But anyway, that's like a whole other discussion.
Yeah. How did we get from Writer's Strike to Legend of Zelda to the halcyon days of our youth? I don't know.
That's the beauty of this podcast, honestly. Because it is so unstructured. It goes off on so many tangents that, I mean, it's partly the reason why we only have 2 listeners. So, okay, fine. Let's get back on track. Should we start?
Yeah, let's kick it off.
Welcome to the Extra Buttery podcast. It's a show about movies, TV, anything with a story and actors on a screen, really. Join Jason Chan and Robert Snow's free-flowing conversation with deep dives into characters and plot with the occasional salty opinion. So get your popcorn, I got mine right here. Let's start the show!
Welcome to the 118th episode of the Extra Buttery podcast. I am your co-host, Jason Chen in Vancouver. Joining me in Toronto is Robert Snow.
Hello.
And today we've got a lot of things to sift through. First, we're going to start with Succession, which just ended after 4 seasons. Then we're going to jump into 3 movies, Blackberry, Fast X or Fast 10, Across the Spider-Verse, the new Sony animated Spider-Man adventure. And then we're going to finish off with the 5th film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, Succession.
Yeah, Succession.
What are the CEO vibes?
The kids are not equipped to take on the role.
I'm just gonna fire half that room. Who would we prefer, one of us or one of the old guard?
If there's a ring, my hat's in.
The negative case would go, you're a clumsy interloper and no one trusts you. The only guy pulling for you is dead. You're just married to the ex-boss's daughter and she doesn't even like you.
Jesus, Carl.
That's how the naysayers might frame it.
Those darn naysayers.
I was watching the finale and I was wondering too, like, I vaguely remember us making predictions about who would end up at the top at the end of the show.
Yeah, we talked about
what did we say about Tom Wambsgams? Because I don't quite remember.
Well, we didn't say anything because
did we not? I thought we did.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we talked about like, oh, will it be any of the siblings, or will they give the CEO job of Waystar to a non-sibling?
Which is what happened.
But we didn't name the non-sibling. I think we thought maybe it could have been Carl, it could have been Frank, it could have been Jerry. Tom was probably pretty far down most people's lists of possibilities.
But at the same time, of all the non-family characters, Tom probably made the most sense.
Well, yeah, he had ingratiated himself with Lucas Matson. He had played like that kind of willing puppet role for a long time, where he made it known to, like, even when Logan was still around, he made it known that, like, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be your fall guy. You know, I'll cover up all of the scandals in the cruise division. I'll do this, I'll do that. And, you know, he seemed to, I think there was it was like season 2 or something. He met an old hand, like a guy who had been running the cruise division. And the guy said to him, look, we're the shit eaters. You know, we take care of all of the dirty business. We don't question anything. You know, that's our role here. And the look of like fear on Tom's face when he realized what he was getting into in that situation was hilarious. But, yeah, the character just kind of made his way up doing that exact thing for so long. And meanwhile, fighting with Shiv and, you know, getting pulled into some of the other machinations. But yeah. So
I know you love the term inside baseball. Here's a really inside baseball thing for you. So
okay.
Wambsgams it's a really rare German name.
Okay.
And historically there is one Wambsgams that kind of caught everyone's attention leading up to finale. Wambsgams was this baseball player back in like even before the Depression era, I think.
Okay.
And he was known for one thing, and that was turning an unassisted triple play in baseball. And so the theory was that his unassisted triple play was taking out the 3 Roy siblings.
Oh.
And that's where the writers got his name from. So
does that basically mean that they had this in mind since the very beginning when they named the character?
I think so.
Okay.
That's the working theory anyway. And it makes sense. It's too good to be a coincidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and when we were talking about predictions, I mean, we never really landed on anything in particular the last time, but
because it was so unpredictable, in my opinion. Anyway,
we did talk about how like there's so much irony in the fact that we've sat through like nearly 40 episodes of this show, and the ins and outs of which of the siblings will get it or which won't, you know, back and forth. But then the great irony is that none of them get it. And that's like the funniest outcome of all.
Yeah.
Funny for us, but like tragic for them, because they not only do they like lose out on this family business in many ways, but then they kind of, if you were to pick up with those characters later on, you would see just how broken their relationships with each other are. Like, you know, Kendall probably hates Shiv for the rest of his life for what she did to him in that boardroom.
Well, he probably hates everyone, but I like all 3 characters end up being caked in irony though, right? So like Kendall believes he's better than his dad, and in the end he's worse than his dad because he doesn't get to run the company.
Yes. Yeah.
Roman tries to be like his dad, but he ends up being who he is, really, a playboy.
Yeah.
Like he was never fit to run anything at all in the first place.
No.
And Shiv was always trying to like upset the patriarchy, and in the end she becomes like basically like a model wife, like a side piece to Tom Wambsgams.
Yes.
I thought of the 3 final scenes, the one with Shiv in the car where she kind of like lightly holds hands with Tom Wambsgams after he offers it, I thought that was the most impressive scene in the series and one of the best endings I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much like, you know, the director of the episode, Mark Malode, he's a British guy. He directed The Menu, which we talked about back last year, and he's been a director in Hollywood for a long time. He's directed episodes of Game of Thrones. He said that working with Sarah Snook, who plays Shiv.
Yeah, she's so good.
He says that from all of the observation he's done of the way she works, she is very careful with all of the physical decisions that she makes. So that scene you're talking about where she just kind of like, she doesn't really hold Tom's hand. She just, just places her hand kind of there.
She
in
like
this sort of like,
yeah, like
it's like kissing
her
the ring or
fingers are
something.
kind of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
like
kind of got the claw thing going. It looks like she's a puppet.
Yeah. And it's like, that Sarah Snook is a good enough actor that she thought through what that would mean, like that exact kind of placement. So I think that's just evidence about what we already know, that, this is one of the best performed shows that we've seen in a long time, best written. And yeah, it came through with a really satisfactory ending. So,
two things that I also really appreciated. One, Carolina basically telling them to fire Hugo because he's a useless piece of shit. I love that part about Carolina. Like, finally, we get to see the knives come out from her, because like going into the finale, she was always like really straight edge, and I was really like curious about her character and what she actually thought, because it felt like she was the only one who never got to share what she was thinking privately.
Yeah.
I didn't expect the murder that Kendall committed in season 1 or 2 to come back. I thought we were done with that. But for that to come back and then be the reason for him to be unfit to be CEO, I think makes a lot of sense. I didn't see that coming because I had completely forgotten about that. And a lot of shows just abandon certain like major plot points seasons prior, right? Like How I Met Your Mother was like really guilty of this. Where like if you looked at the ending and then you go back to the beginning of the show, like it doesn't make any sense how it ends up. Like
I knew that had been kind of floating over Kendall for a lot of season 3. And he has this big moment with his siblings in the finale of season 3 where he tells them about it, and they try their best to console him, but they don't do a very good job because they are who they are. But
like, dude, he murdered a guy.
Yeah. And
how do you console a person?
And they sort of try to make him feel better, but then, you're right. It doesn't get spoken of for almost the entirety of season 4, but it becomes the last chip that he can play because,
or that's played against him.
They play it against him, and then he tries to say, it was just a lie, blah, blah, blah. But like, he doesn't get away with it. Obviously, they don't buy that argument.
I thought he was gonna like eye gouge Roman when he was like pressing him against the wall, like basically physically threatening him.
Yeah, that was a pretty intense moment.
Did you notice that Roman ordered Jerry's drink at the end of the episode, the martini?
No, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, that's Jerry's drink.
Oh, okay.
So he seriously got some like mommy issues.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of mommy issues, their mother, is it their biological mother?
Yeah, the one who was kind of like organizing at Logan's funeral.
Her husband, their stepdad, is a complete dink.
Yeah.
He's by far the worst character in the show. He's worse than Hugo.
Yeah, they spend some time making fun of him in season 3, and they make it
now
clear
we know why.
Yeah, they make it clear that he's no match for Logan in terms of intellect or business sense or whatever. But he becomes a good source of comedy in that finale where they just have no time for his pitch.
Did you like the finale overall? Did you find it fit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it fit. Yeah, I think it was very smooth. It transitioned, like, I think the shock of Logan's death in episode 3, with still like 6 or 7 episodes to go. Mm-hmm. I think it did provoke a lot of questions because we were like, oh wow, okay, so Logan's not going to make it to the end. There's going to be a lot of material between that and the ending. Where are we going to go? What's going to happen? But they clearly had a very structured kind of plan. They brought everyone to that final point without it feeling rushed or convenient or anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I asked that because HBO's Game of Thrones ending was so bad.
Yeah.
I'm glad this one, like, they really stuck it for this ending. I immediately after watching the finale, I almost wanted to watch it again just because there's so many little things you could have picked up.
Yeah.
But I think this series, even though it can be draining sometimes, just following everyone, I think there's some rewatchability in this.
Yeah, for sure. And like, especially if you have like a friend or someone who hasn't watched any of it or fell off in season 1, and then you're like, okay, no, I can tell you for sure this has a good ending. It's worth going all the way through. You're not going to be disappointed. That's reason enough to rewatch it.
Yeah. Were you surprised Kendall Roy did not commit suicide at the end?
I think that would have been a pretty dark ending. I think the ambiguity is better. I think there's a chance that he does, but there's also a chance that he doesn't. Of course, you've read the story that Jeremy Strong tried to jump in the river once the cameras were that they got the take that they used.
No, really? I didn't know that.
His method acting kind of took over, and he ran towards the water. He clambered out onto like the pilings by the water, and the crew were like, "No, Jeremy, don't do that. Like we got the take we needed." Like,
so I don't know his body of work as well as I probably should, but is he really method, or is he just like trying to win an Emmy here?
All the talk from the set is that he is pretty method. Like he wouldn't call it the method, because that's a very specific like school of study. But he would say like, he would have some airy fairy kind of explanation for what he does. But it is like, in terms of losing himself in the character, he definitely does. And Brian Cox has made fun of him for it, because Brian Cox is able to just like go onto set, look at his lines and be like, okay, I'm going to memorize these, and then we come back and we'll shoot it. And I don't have to like, tell myself a story about who this character is. I just play him. He's got a very.
But he's old school like that, though, right?
Yeah.
It's like Sean Connery in Hunt for Red October. It's just, I'm going to show up with my Scottish accent.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care at all. But Brian Cox is a better actor. So
yeah.
You don't think so?
Better than Jeremy Strong?
So.
I mean, he's...
No, Jeremy than Sean Connery.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Blackberry, do you want to move on?
Yeah, well, we're staying in the business world a little bit. So this is a Canadian film, and we don't actually cover Canadian films very often here on the show because, I mean, let's all admit it, Canadian film, Canadian TV doesn't really grab the headlines. Sometimes it can be a little boring, a little kind of try hard, if to use a tired phrase.
Just look up and down CBC's catalog, and that's the kind of stories we get.
Well, funny you say that, because CBC has actually signed a deal for this particular story. They're going to distribute a 3-episode miniseries version of this movie. So they're going to add an extra hour of footage, or recover an extra hour of footage, and release it as 3 one-hour episodes, whereas the version that I saw was the 2-hour cut that's in movie theaters.
That's pretty awesome. That's actually like the greatest idea they've ever come up with.
Yeah.
Rather than making some like TV special original.
Yeah. But all of that is a really long way of saying that like this is actually one of the best Canadian movies I've seen in a long time.
We are in a race to get this thing to market, and we are a year behind. I need a prototype.
I'll do it perfectly, or I don't do it.
Mike, are you familiar with the saying perfect is the enemy of good?
Well, good enough is the enemy of humanity.
What do you call it?
It's called a Blackberry.
Huh. Try typing with your thumbs.
Like Succession, it has a tale to tell about like rapid rise in the business world, followed by a very steep fall off. It's, of course, telling the story of Research in Motion / Blackberry, the one-time smartphone king of the world before Apple came on the scene.
Did you have one?
I had one. I had one of them. Yeah, I never became a fanboy, but I
never had one. I kind of missed out on this particular piece of pop culture.
And it was famous for having this very tactile keyboard. A full keyboard, a QWERTY keyboard that compared to like the flip phones of the era, where you had to hit each number a couple of times to choose your letter when you're typing out a text. Like I heard about Blackberries. I knew they were like more favored by like business people for email, but I thought, for texting, this would be great. I can just hammer out text really quickly. And it was true. Like once you got into the rhythm of it, you learned the way it worked. You could get so much faster with typing things out. And so I had one for like 2 years or whatever, and enjoyed it. But then, of course, all the touchscreen based phones were coming on the market, and BlackBerry had no competition for it. They just couldn't. They never really developed an app store. They never really got on board with like these sleek glass and plastic things that everyone's so used to having these days. and they insisted that the keyboard based phone was the way it should be. So then this movie charts that development from like when Mike Lazaridis, who was a Canadian tech whiz, played by Jay Baruchel, he goes with his best friend, who's actually played by Matt Johnson, a guy I hadn't really seen in anything before. I guess he seems to be more of a comedy guy. And he's the director of the movie too. So the two of them go to this sort of venture capital kind of firm. It's not really venture capital. They're kind of looking for business financing to get their idea for this device off the ground. And they meet with Jim Balsillie, who famously went on to be the co-CEO of Blackberry. So their first pitch goes really badly. Jim Balsillie has no time for them. He thinks that they're stupid geeks and he doesn't understand the product. But when he gets fired for going against his boss's wishes, he's suddenly in need of a job. So he goes back to these nerds that he completely dismissed, and he says, hey, I'll help you build your company into something that will actually work. I've got the business sense. You've got the tech sense. Together, we'll be able to build this thing up. And so it, the movie obviously has to skip forward a couple of times. There's it touches down in a couple of different eras of BlackBerry's success, but you see them go from this, tiny office on the second floor of some laundromat to, their own place in Waterloo in Ontario, to having hundreds and then thousands of employees, and they're making deals and everything, and they're flying high. And then the iPhone comes along and it all comes apart.
Is it like a satire?
Yeah, I mean, it feels similar to Succession in the sense of like it's got lots of comedy beats, but it's also got the kind of like dramatic stuff of boardrooms and deal making and ruthless people out to eat each other's lunch.
Because I noticed in the trailer that they made Jim Balsillie look like a crazy madman.
Yeah, so they definitely show how like Mike Lazaridis is kind of like he's being depicted as this quiet geek guy who just wants to make the perfect device, and Jim Balsillie is this firebrand guy who's like really quick to anger, played by Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Got the bald cap going. He's like destroying a phone in a phone booth when something's not going his way, screaming at everyone, cursing, blah blah blah. Your classic toxic boss, I guess.
You're an insane marketer who ends up being right about a lot of things, but a lot of hubris, right?
Yeah. And you would probably really latch on to the part that the NHL has to play in this whole story.
Oh, because he tried to buy a hockey team and move it to Hamilton?
Yeah, he tried that, but he also tried 4 other times. He tried to buy the Phoenix Coyotes. He tried to buy another couple of teams. He was dead set on moving a hockey team to somewhere else in Canada that didn't have one. And the movie depicts the argument in the movie is how he let his love of hockey and his desire to be an owner completely cloud his business judgment, and he just totally distract him from what was happening at BlackBerry and kind of essentially let Apple catch up to them.
Mm-hmm. He was famously stiffed multiple times.
Yeah.
And he always wanted to put another team in Southwestern Ontario.
Yeah. So there's a couple of scenes where he goes to the NHL offices. He's meeting with Gary Bettman. He's being frosted out by the other owners, and he's there's a scene where he like finds out that they're not going to let him buy the team, and he's like screaming at them saying I'm from Waterloo.
Jay Baruchel is a big hockey guy too, right? So because he did the Goon movies, yeah. So I expected that in the movie. I'm sure there's more of that footage in the 3-hour version.
Probably, yeah. They might expand that a little bit. So
is it a tragic story though at the end? Like BlackBerry was like a world leading company, and like a lot of big Canadian companies, it ends up being kaput.
Yeah, it is a little tragic, it shows how certainly Mike Lazaridis kind of compromised some of his ideals to get ahead. He went from being this perfectionist with the tech to kind of caving and letting some of the manufacturing be done in China. He ends up kind of alienating himself from the other nerds that he built the company with. He's mean to his best friend, played by Matt Johnson. He becomes more of like a shark. He kind of takes that inspiration from Jim Balsillie. So
is this better compared to Jobs?
I never saw Jobs, but I saw.
Oh, okay.
There was.
I'm talking about the Fassbender one, not the Ashton Kutcher.
Oh,
one.
that's the one. Okay, yeah, because the Ashton Kutcher one's called Jobs. I'm pretty sure the Fassbender one's called Steve Jobs, I think.
Okay.
But
okay.
I think Steve Jobs was directed by David Fincher, so it would be different.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's automatically better.
I think this had more laughs than Steve Jobs. So if you're going in there for more of a blend of comedy and drama, then it's good on that front. I mean, certainly I would not have expected Glenn Howerton and Jay Baruchel to be so good at the dramatic stuff. They're both comedy guys. But
see, that's the thing, eh? I find comedy guys can do drama, but drama people can't do comedy.
Yeah. So
I think that was one of the biggest downfalls, or not downfalls, but one of the biggest setbacks, and one of those things that was held against Jim Carrey and Robin Williams to a certain extent, was that they were really good dramatic actors.
Yeah.
But everyone was like, make me laugh, clown.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really, really sucked for them because they were never taken seriously.
Yeah.
There are some that were a comedic actors and try to go the drama route, and it doesn't work. But I do find that when really people who are really into heavy dramas do comedy, it's an even worse effect in my opinion. They just never end up being funny at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you're curious about that transition between how comedy guys do in the dramatic stuff, it's worth seeing Blackberry just for that, especially if you're familiar with Glenn Howerton, Jay Baruchel. And the critics are also on board with this thing. I think it was hitting 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a real runaway hit for a Canadian film.
Well, I was gonna say, I remember we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons being kind of the sleeper hit. Yeah. I can see Blackberry getting a nomination for best original screenplay or something like that, right?
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. They love these tiny films that are about real life situations and whatnot, right? So
yeah.
Do you want to know about a film that's not funny at all?
Okay. Was that Fast X?
Yeah. Oh my God. This movie was so bad.
So wait, but you're in the camp of someone who, you've always
I like the series.
You've always defended the series. You've always stood up
Yes.
for it, even when it's at its silliest. So are you saying that
Yes.
this one is bad enough that it's even hard to defend on that normal level?
It's not even so bad it's funny, silly.
Okay.
It's just stupid.
If you never would have gotten behind that wheel, I'd never be the man I am today. And now, I am the man who's going to break your family. Piece by piece.
I don't care if I'm spoiling the movie here, but we go from cars in space in the previous film, which is just silly and just kind of funny if you just think about it, to just street races in Rio de Janeiro. How did we regress to this stage? Now I get that it's two parts, it's a two-parter film.
Right.
And by the way, I hate this trend of having cliffhangers, and I will get to that in the next movie we talk about. But Fast 10 follows the same beats. Vin Diesel and his family are under threat. A whole host of characters that they helped or worked with come back in some sort of weird fashion. There's a bunch of one-liners that aren't even funny anymore. I don't know what happened to the writing, but none of the jokes land. The car chases aren't nearly as exciting, maybe because they've run out of ideas, and maybe because it's not Justin Lin directing. But as a fan of the series, and I say that unironically, I really love Tokyo Drift. And I really thought Fast 5 was awesome. And I watched all the movies leading up to Fast 9. This was unforgivably boring and bad.
Wow.
It should have ended at Fast 9. I don't think there's a single redeeming quality to Fast 10. It's not exciting. It's not funny. The dialogue is so bad. I couldn't help but laugh at some of the lines out there, especially there are some lines that they make Charlize Theron and Michelle Rodriguez say, and it is just most god awful stuff I've ever heard. It's one of those moments where you think about Harrison Ford, where you're like, George, you can write this shit, but you can't say it.
Yeah, this is blistering criticism, though. I'm really surprised. I thought you were going to come here and go to bat for it, considering that it was,
and you know
it was
what? I went into with high hopes because I saw some of the critics' reviews, right? And they're like, yeah, it's the same, it's silly, but it's fun. And I was like, all right, you know what? I'm prepared. But I came out of this thinking like, this is worse than the second Fast and the Furious movie. Because at least that had a bit of more of a plot, I think this was easily the worst of the films since it became like a superhero. A faux superhero,
yeah, because it's definitely that. Do you think that Justin Lin realized that partway through and that's why he quit in the middle of production?
I don't know why he quit. I don't blame him. The thing about this movie is that Fast and the Furious has a huge ensemble cast. Like ever since they introduced Statham, The Rock, John Cena, Charlize Theron. And the problem is you have to somehow find screen time for all these people. So their idea of doing it is to split everyone up into 5 different plot lines. The problem is none of those 5 plot lines are remotely interesting. John Cena spends the entire film hanging out with a 12-year-old
kid. Yeah, I heard about
kid,
that. Yeah.
Driving along a highway doing absolutely fuck all. He has one action sequence inside a house and he appears out of nowhere as well. And I just didn't understand. Like, it's the plot lines are so bad. I didn't care what was going on. At some point, I dozed off and I kind of lost track of the plot. But I didn't really care anyway because this movie solves absolutely nothing. I will say though, if there is one reason to see it, it's to see Jason Momoa's performance. It is, for lack of a better word, weird. It is very similar to how I saw Jared Leto in House of Gucci, where he was doing like a completely different thing than everyone else.
Right.
In my opinion, I thought he was doing like a version of a Joker. Like he was cross-dressing. There's some queer coding in there. He's like a pure psychopath. He's not in it to kill anyone. He just wants to torture people. That's just his MO.
Okay.
And so you're like, okay, so I get what you're saying here. You're saying that he's not going to kill every main characters because it's against his code, but he's just going to make life really, really miserable for them. So please stay and watch for 2.5 hours. And so at that point, you're just like, okay, what's the point then? Like if he's not going to go for the kill, well, he's going to be the one who dies anyway. So what the hell are you watching here?
And so after all of that, like, they establish that there's no real narrative stakes and that he gets all of this like scenery to chew and he can like, do whatever he wants and just have the time of his life on set. Are they going to do that thing that they do with all Fast and the Furious villains where they find some roundabout way of getting him to become part of the family at the end?
I'm not so sure that'll happen with Jason Momoa, but I'm sure that'll happen with at least one character, I guess. The thing with Fast and the Furious is like one of their trademarks is retconning in the past now. We saw that when they brought back Han. Yes. They bring back another character from the dead, which is like completely stupid and surprising. More stupid than surprising, I should say. And at this point, you're just like, I don't care anymore because nobody stays dead. And past history means nothing because you just retcon everything. Paul Walker shows up in like archival footage, and that's how they introduce Jason Momoa's character. Yeah. And I hate it when films do that. It's like they're trying to create stakes that are never there in the first place.
Yeah. And that's what, it started to get on my nerves with the last one. And like, granted the last one had bigger action scenes. It had some wilder stuff, like the space car and the magnet
space
truck and stuff. Yeah. All of those things. But, I do have a ceiling where like you have to be authentic with the characters to a point. You have to allow them to die. You have to have some stakes. You can't have them be a villain and then just fold them in with the family. Like the whole idea that Jason Statham and what's his character's name in this?
Shaw.
The whole idea that Shaw and Han can be friends after like they tried killing each other like movies and movies ago, and that it's just water under the bridge. I mean, that's just such an insult to the intelligence of, admittedly you're not supposed to think too hard about these movies, but you do have to think to a certain point, because if you don't care about the characters at all or what happens to them, then what's the point?
You'll be happy to hear that Han and Shaw fight again and then team up again in this movie.
Right. So just
and get this, Han actually goes to Shaw and knocks on his door, and that's how they get into a fight, literally.
fun. Okay.
And I'm sorry, it's just really stupid. There's just little bits and pieces of everything in there. There's a part where Han eats like a muffin that's supposedly stuffed with either weed or mushrooms. It's probably shrooms. And he hallucinates for a second, but it's like a 30-second scene and nothing really comes of it. It's not even that funny. It's so weird. And guess what? Pete Davidson's in the scene, so you already know that's bad. It was just
so what. So at the end of all of that, like obviously they're going to have a cliffhanger. They're going to lead into what they're saying is the last one of these saga films. But
oh my god!
They will.
I went on Wikipedia after the movie because I was like, "What else? Please tell me there's no more." I heard and I read somewhere that they might split part 2 into another 2 parts. So Fast 10 could be a 3-part film.
That's not fair.
And I nearly just threw up in my mouth. I was like, I can't take this anymore. Like, for an action film, it really bored me, and I think that's the worst criticism you can make of an action.
Yes. Yeah, if you can't even lose yourself in the stupidity, or not the stupidity, but like if you can't lose yourself in the pure entertainment of cars smashing into each other, then something has gone wrong. And
yeah, I mean, like the car chase scene that opens the movie is through Paris, and at the entire time I'm thinking like, wow, Mission Impossible does it 100 times better than this.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you go from cars in space to a street race through Rio and a street race through Paris? Like, come on, let's step up your game here. Like,
so you mean that there was a part in the trailer where like Dom like smashes 2 helicopters together because he attaches them with like a cable to his car? Like, was that kind of underwhelming?
I thought it was really underwhelming, because it got to the point where like the car before up to that point had flipped like 20 times. It's been crushed. It's been scraped. It's been T-boned a bunch of times. And Vin Diesel comes out just immaculate and oily.
Yeah.
With his shiny bald head.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's just like, and you know what? He's done the same stunt with the cars and helicopters previously.
Oh.
In the previous Fast and Furious. And I think there was one, I think it was the one that featured The Rock, Shaw and Hobbs.
Okay.
That was another one that had cars and helicopters.
Right.
And it's like you've seen the same stunts over and over again. So there's nothing new.
So 2 questions then. What do you think? Was it bad enough that you will not close out the series and watch the following films? Because like as a fan, do you owe it to yourself to see them all?
I will go see it, but only because if I have nothing else to do and there's no other films I want to see, and I have enough scene points for a free ticket.
Okay.
Then right. I will go see it.
Okay. Second question, what do you make of The Rock now turning to this franchise after swearing off of it and trying to use it to revitalize his star power after the failure of Black Adam?
I'm sorry, The Rock is a fucking joke to me now. I'm sorry. Okay, like he can't make a good film. There's nothing remotely interesting about any of his films these days. I read that somewhere that he's basically forced a live action Moana into production.
Sounded like it, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, he says he's buried the hatchet with Vin Diesel. I think The Rock is just trying to find another IP to poach, another IP to like raise his boat. I think it's funny that he refuses to believe Black Adam was a colossal failure. And the DC in general, like it's not entirely his fault, but let's just say Black Adam was not like a standout film.
No, but he was tied together. He spent so much time hyping it, and then even after it finally came out, and you know we both saw it, it wasn't terrible, but it was also just it wasn't the kind of it didn't live up to the sort of franchise building power that he claimed the character was capable of. And then the Shazam sequel just totally face planted right after it, and those 2 characters are supposed to be in the like, you know, famously at odds, so there's just nothing left in that side of the DC universe.
Did you see Fury of the Gods?
No, I couldn't bring myself to do it. It seemed like Zachary Levi was begging people to go to see it, and I couldn't do it.
Okay, so between this and are you going to see Fast 10?
Maybe on streaming.
Okay, so between Fear of the Gods and Fast 10, notice how Gal Gadot's career has gone, and I'll just leave it at that. Like, she went from leading lady to like essentially a side piece, and yeah, it's kind of hilarious how far she's fallen too, based on the disastrous Wonder Woman 1984.
Okay,
which I think was worse than Black Adam.
Yeah, that was worse than Black Adam. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
So it's just funny, like The Rock, to me, I think Hobbs, out of all the characters he's played recently, Hobbs might be his best character. So there might be a chance he revives his franchise, but I'm sorry, the film sucks. Like, even if you're the best part of a shitty film, it's still a shitty film.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to separate yourself from that. As hard as he tries, this is Vin Diesel's franchise. This is not his franchise. If he wants to do a Hobbs thing, he has to do a Hobbs and Shaw 2. Like him and Statham.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's a part of him that wants to hijack this IP, but I don't think it's going to happen. And a part of me also thinks, though, that Fast and Furious needs Hobbs to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting time watching this. Well, it's kind of like, to overuse the metaphor, it's like a rise and fall, kind of like Blackberry,
Yeah.
like this, they had this moment where they they were making $1 billion easy for Universal on every release. And I'm sure this one's doing well financially, but like, it just feels like the fans are falling away from it now.
Also, have you noticed that we're kind of shifting like our expectations of what an action star is these days? Like, we went from like a bunch of like beefcakes in the 90s, to like beefcakes now, and then we're moving back to like Tom Cruise, who's like not a beefcake.
No.
It's kind of interesting how that's happened, right? Like, even Daniel Craig, to me, is an action star, and he's not a beefcake, right? The days of like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Diesel, The Rock, I think we're starting to like fade a little bit. Like, we're starting to move away from like the oiled up muscle man action hero.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because like, even if you look at the TV show Jack Ryan, I know it's not huge, but John Krasinski is an action hero now.
Yeah.
Like, Chris Pratt, not really a beefcake, but like nevertheless an action hero, and not like super masculine like them. He's kind of like a dumb kind of guy sometimes. And Tom Cruise is like immortal. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that our expectations of what an action superstar looks like has kind of changed.
Yeah, it's not enough for it just to be the guy. There's got to be some character, or there has to be some, like Schwarzenegger can walk into, or in the 90s, Schwarzenegger could walk into any movie and you'd be like, that's a Schwarzenegger movie. I'm going to watch it because it's Schwarzenegger. I don't care who he's playing. But now, like, Schwarzenegger does this big, or like relatively big, show on Netflix called FUBAR. It sucks. Nobody's paying any attention to it. And
look at Keanu Reeves. Like, that guy is not a beefcake, but he is a legit action star.
Yeah. Yeah. He, like, John Wick is doing gangbusters. So
yeah. And apparently we're going to get a fifth one.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Jesus. Anyway, we should move on to better things.
Yeah. So tell me about Spider-Verse, because I regretfully have not seen it yet, but I've been counting down for it.
Miles, being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. You have a choice between saving one person and saving every world. Send me home. I can't do that.
I can do both! Spider-Man, always...
Not always.
What about Uncle Ben?
If not for Uncle Ben, most of us wouldn't be here.
So, without spoiling too much, you know how Into the Spider-Verse ends where Gwen Stacy comes back?
Yeah.
And says, "Hi, Miles."
Yeah.
Okay, so Into the Spider-Verse pretty much picks up at that point.
Okay.
There's a bit of a prologue, which is really great because it sets up Gwen Stacy as one of the main characters. In fact, I would argue she's the main character in this film because so much of it is from her POV.
Okay.
But anyway, so it kind of picks up where it leaves off, and the supervillain this time is called the Spot, and it's this guy who can move and absorb power from different Spider-Verses. And it's a brilliant gag because he opens up these like black holes and he jumps through them. And if you think about it, literally he's a plot hole. And so it's really clever because you've got this movie where they're jumping around from Spider-Verse to Spider-Verse, setting up this huge, gigantic payoff in the movie. And it just makes a lot of sense. He disappears in the middle part of it, but you know what he's up to and you know he returns. And then when he does return, you're like, oh my God, the shit just got real. And that to me, that's
impressive. I mean, I remember the Spot as a character on like the old animated show.
And he's hilarious.
And he was always like, in that show, he was depicted as being a bit of a loser who was kind of like a second-rate villain who, you know, Spider-Man didn't really take him seriously because he was pretty easy to defeat. But he just had this goofy power that allowed him to pop up in different places with the holes that he pulls off his costume. Kind of like David Dalsmashian's character in the Suicide Squad.
Yeah, Polka Dot Man,
but it's interesting that they've decided to scale him up to be a more formidable villain this time.
And that's the sign you have a really successful villain, when you sit back and you go, holy shit, he just showed up. It's kind of like whenever the Joker shows up in a Batman film.
Right.
You're like, oh my God, it's the Joker. Shit's going to get real.
Right.
There's always that nemesis. For Spider-Man, it's always kind of hard to say because he's had so many great villains. But so far in this series, in this franchise, the Dot has really, I think, elevated himself into one of his nemesis, basically. And I think that's a really impressive feat. It's kind of like kicking Guardians of the Galaxy into the mainstream. It's just impressive. But as you would expect, the art is really great. The voice acting is really great. Hits all the emotional beats of a story, of a story with a lot of characters that go through their own emotional arcs. So Gwen Stacy, Miles Morales, but also I think his parents and some of the other characters in the that show up.
Right.
They don't show up for a lot, but you know there's a lot of backstory behind them. And so basically in the pursuit of keeping all these Spider-Verses under control and defeating the Dot, Miles Morales joins this group of Spider-Men from all sorts of different universes. And they're led by Spider-Man 2099, voiced by Oscar Isaac, who does a really great job. I won't say any more, but there are two things I should know. One, it is, in my opinion, overly long. It is too long. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. And because it's Spider-Man, because there's a lot of fan service that's needed, and it's granted it's good fan service, I do think it kind of drags a little though.
Oh, okay.
There's a part where he goes to like the Spider-Verse headquarters.
Yeah.
And it's really cool how they tie in everything, and they literally tie in everything. It's really impressive. The other thing is too, so do you know that this is the first movie of 2 parts?
Yeah, they announced them both at the same time. Last year, the year before, I think, like 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the auditorium I was in, I would say the majority of the people did not know it was the first of 2 parts. So when it ended on a cliffhanger, they were audible like, what the fucks, or like horseshit. and I actually go online and like apparently a lot of people were pissed off that it ended on a cliffhanger because they didn't realize it. And I was like, really? You didn't realize? I guess we're more in tune with like movies and stuff.
Yeah,
so
I suppose.
I knew beforehand.
Yeah.
So I knew there was a chance that it would end on an unresolved storyline, but it really ends on a cliffhanger. And I think people were really pissed off because you could read it as 2 ways. One, people don't like being teased, especially in that sense. And 2, because I think it was so good that people just wanted to see the conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, if you're involved enough with the characters that you get angry when you don't find out what happens to them, then that, you know, it's like a double-edged sword. It means that you've created characters that are resonating with people, but it also means that you risk pissing people off when you tell them you have to wait like a year or more to find out what the resolution is.
Correct.
And it's kind of like, it's a bit like TV in that sense. Like if you have an absolute like killer cliffhanger and season finale kind of thing, and then you're like, haha, you have to wait. You know, I mean, I think people are more used to that happening in TV, but when it happens in a movie, it can be polarizing.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You know, we all remember the cliffhanger at the end of The Matrix Revolutions, and you know that there are people. I think, well, you've also made the argument that The Matrix Revolutions and The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions are all one film.
Yeah.
I can kind of buy that.
So it's kind of the same thing with Dune, where like I can't possibly give you a proper rating on the first part if I haven't seen the second part, because I see it as one film.
Right.
This I can do the similar thing with this, except I actually really enjoyed the film. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the first one. This one just had too much going on, but it is, I think, a shoo-in to at least be nominated for Best Animated Feature. It's really that good.
Yeah. Did the first one win Best Animated Feature? I can't remember.
I think it did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
If not, then that's a travesty.
Yeah.
But
so much work goes into these things.
Exactly. And it's great. I really highly recommend you go see it as soon as you can.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, sticking in the MCU then, obviously Guardians 3 has been out for a while. You mentioned it a little bit earlier in the context of, like, you know, the feat that James Gunn kind of accomplished back when 2014, when he took this team of characters that nobody really knew outside of the comics world and made them into these successful movie characters. And so, like, you know, the third one came out a month and a half or so ago, and I saw it at the time, and I was thinking to myself, like, okay, like this is the last group of characters who needed some sort of resolution after the events of Endgame, and they get it here. You know, they leave a lot of the characters off, and you know, they don't say like we'll never see them again, but they also say that it's clear from what James Gunn has said that he doesn't want to make any more, and Dave Bautista doesn't want to play Drax anymore. And
he doesn't.
There's a few. No, and which is fine. And like, there's other actors in the group who are, you know, moving on to other things too. So I just couldn't shake this feeling when I watched Guardians 3 about, you know, maybe I'm done with the MCU now. Like, I don't really have much of a reason to continue watching. I haven't been plugged in with the shows. I haven't, I haven't liked a lot of the Phase 6 or whatever the hell we're on now. Like, the Doctor Strange sequel was no fun.
It had fun parts,
but the Thor 4 also fun.
Thor 4 was bad. Yeah, I didn't like
that. You know, Ant-Man Quantumania was pretty bad. Like, I've just been having a bad time with these things recently. But Guardians 3 was great because it was of a piece with all the ones that came before, and those characters work really well under James Gunn's leadership.
We'll all fly away together. One last time. Into the forever and beautiful sky.
You know how we talked about how the characters never die in Fast and Furious? So knowing that this was the final entry in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, and knowing that this was definitely the last film for this crew in particular, I did expect something dramatic to happen.
Yeah.
So when some of the characters die on screen, I actually believed it. So, and there were two instances where that happened, right? So one was Rocket Raccoon on the table, and the other one was Peter Quill. And I totally bought that scene, hook, line, and sinker. And then they came back, and I was like, you know what? Had I not known that this was the last movie of this trilogy, I would have been so pissed. And it wouldn't have had the same effect, because I knew that they would come back in some sort of form in the next film, but there is no next film. So I guess it's one of those times where, like, if you know this is a one-off, or if you know this is the last film in the series, that's when a death fake out actually works.
There's not the finality of the character being dead, but there's the finality of this team, and that, you know, this the leadership of that director or that writer that's gonna come to an end. And you know, they might, like, Chris Pratt might reprise the role under a different filmmaker, for example, a couple of years down the road, but it'll be different from what James Gunn has done. It might be written slightly differently. There'll be a different quality to the humor, whatever it is. And that's fine, I don't particularly care, but I also, it was James Gunn's version of these characters that I attach myself to. So I don't have a special need to see them anymore after this one.
Did you find the movie kind of creepy?
Yeah, there's lots of like body horror stuff in there, like the fleshy planet and the the stuff, especially the animal cruelty stuff with the high evolutionary villain guy.
The bunny.
The bunny was there was some like Sid's toys in the first Toy Story type quality to it. It was that was definitely the high evolutionary as a villain. He's a lot creepier when he's doing stuff to animals than in any of his confrontations with the Guardians. Like, it felt like they kicked his ass pretty handily. So
yeah, true. But I mean, it is 1 against 5 or 6, whatever it is.
I suppose.
So I mean, it's difficult.
There was just so many characters who said, "Oh, you're going to try to take on the high evolutionary. No one can beat that guy. He's like a god." And then turns out he wasn't much of a god.
It's interesting to me that at the beginning, Peter Quill and Gamora were like the two co-leads, sort of, so to speak.
Yeah,
because they were like the main couple and everything. And then by the end of the series, I cared the least about Gamora.
Yeah. Well, they'd kind of like concluded her story with Endgame, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Fair enough. And she's supposedly a different character, but yeah, I agree. A lot of the characters and part of the appeal of this entire trilogy is that the side characters are always a lot more interesting than they should be.
But then thinking about like the Marvel movies in general, though, like, are there any characters or team ups right now that you're actually excited to see more from, or are you just sort of watching because you've invested so much time in the stories?
Well, that's the thing, right? There's no Iron Man Captain America combo right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's none. I mean, there are characters that I find interesting, but they don't have a good foil. Like I thought Namor was really great, but I don't think the new Black Panther is particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say like what other movies are out there. Thor and Jane, no chemistry at all. The Wasp, I can't stand. I don't think she's very interesting.
No.
Maybe Cassie and Ant-Man, but that's a different kind of relationship. That's like a father-daughter thing. It's not so much like an equal footing team up type thing. So I don't know. But I will have to say, though, I think I enjoyed Volume 3 more than Volume 2 for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, actually. Yeah. I think it, like the ego stuff with Kurt Russell was interesting, but it wasn't as creepy as the High Evolutionary. It wasn't, like, I didn't feel as moved by it because, like, Ego's plan in the second one was just like, let's cover all the planets I've been on with blue goo. And then Peter Quill unlocks his like celestial power and he's like, okay, I'm going to stop you now.
I think that we do visit more like interesting worlds in Volume 3. And that's always been the bigger appeal for Guardians of the Galaxy for me because they're not stuck on Earth.
Yes.
Where a large part of Ego's story is what happens on Earth.
Yeah. And
so, but I don't know if I'm getting tired of the MCU. Like, I mean, you probably have more superhero fatigue than me. Like, I did get superhero fatigue a long time ago. It hasn't hit the point where I just don't want to watch the movies. I don't know, maybe because I'm a sucker for superhero films. So I keep taking the bait.
I'm not totally ruling out all superhero movies. Like I love the Matt Reeves Batman stuff right now.
Actually, speaking of combos, I would say the best combo is Captain Falcon.
Okay.
Captain Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But even then, that to me is it's like B or C list. It's not A list like Tony Stark.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they've talked about making Brie Larson's character the new leader of the Avengers, but that's they have to do so much stuff between now and then with like shows.
She's also like not very popular off screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a certain segment of the internet crowd that really does not like her.
I don't really see, like, I'm fine with her as a, if they decide to put her forward as a leader, I'd be fine with it. I just, I have not.
Like, to me, from a marketing standpoint, Spider-Man's the obvious leader. But he shouldn't be.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be like younger and less experienced, but
Yeah. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I am interested to see the Marvels. I'm sort of intrigued by that.
Is that a show or a movie? I can't even tell anymore.
It's a movie. It's a movie. But the character that is introduced in Marvel's Miss Marvel, she's
from one of the shows.
Yeah, exactly. And Monica Rambeau is obviously from WandaVision. But I'm just curious to see where all that goes. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, they really caught lightning in a bottle with Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, and I think it's really, really hard to replicate that. And I don't see Marvel having the same kind of success as they previously had. It's gonna take a huge shift, like really something out of the blue that catches us off guard, that's gonna revive the franchise to what it was before. I mean, if you're James Gunn, you're salivating because this is DC's chance to overtake him.
Yeah, and
but I don't trust James Gunn.
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that they have to do there with this whole rebirth. But I'm more interested in what DC is doing because they've said, all right, we're pumping the brakes on the continuity. We're making a clean break. We're just redoing everything. And I know that Marvel's got a good thing going and that they don't necessarily need to do the same thing. They don't have to cut everything off and start again. But I would be kind of interested to see what they would do if they did that, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. I think DC's vision should be run by Matt Reeves. I think his dark and gloomy vision should be the overarching theme and feel of the DC universe. Because DC Comics has always been darker.
They have been darker, and I agree with you that what he's doing with Batman is fantastic, and it's very much on brand for the character. It's good to see the character like that, but I don't agree that Superman should be in that same tone because we got that tone. Like, Zack Snyder's had a lot of kicks at the can at making the dark Superman. I think I want a very bright and poppy, colorful, Christopher Reeve-esque Superman for the next Superman. I think it should be bright and hopeful and super like very inspiring, not this kind of like, oh, I'm an alien from another planet and my adoptive dad told me that I can't use my powers and I'm gonna, everything's gonna be shot like it's in a dark alley and blah blah blah. Just
all right, fine. Yeah, okay, I can see your point. I do like Henry Cavill as Superman a lot.
I would be fine with Henry Cavill taking the character back at some point. I just need a break. I need the Christopher Reeve G. Warlockers type Superman on screen again.
Okay, fine. Well, what kind of Wonder Woman do you want then?
Again, like a bright and happy Wonder Woman, and not like, oh, my boyfriend has been brought back from the dead and I'm stuffed his soul into another man's body kind of stuff. Like, that was some...
I'm like 5,000 years old, but I've only had one boyfriend.
Yeah, there's some...
and it was a brief fling in World War II.
There's some weird stuff on the go that last time around that I'm still wrestling with.
Okay, fair enough. So Batman's the only one who's allowed to be in this dark underworld.
Yeah, because he's the contrast, right? He's like, you put him up against Superman or up against Wonder Woman, and he's like the emo kid in the corner. And it's funnier that way when you see him in a contrast with the inspiring ones. Fair enough.
Speaking of DC, have you seen the Harley Quinn cartoon show?
I've seen lots of clips from it, but I've never watched a full episode.
Oh, okay. Watch it. It's hilarious.
I've heard lots of good things. Like, it's really like, it's definitely embracing the more adult side of the character and all of that.
Yeah, and also just because they point out everything that's ridiculous about superhero movies and DC, and their version of Batman is just as dark, but he's like caught in this world that's really humorous and silly. And it's kind of funny to see that happen.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you've got to have Batman just kind of grumbling while everyone else is being really cartoony around him.
So you saying we need a cheery Superman, a cheery Wonder Woman, plus Matt Reeves' Batman. It's like this image that goes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's so many other things to occupy our attention over the coming months. Like, we've got the new indie sequel, which is apparently not great. I don't know.
Does that surprise you?
No, not really. But I had some hope. I had hope that it would be good for his last time out. And like, Oppenheimer's coming out, Barbie. There's so many.
I don't know how I feel about Barbie. Have you seen the trailer?
I have seen the trailer. It's so weird and like,
yeah, it is
neon.
Weird. It's either going to be really good or really bad, in my opinion.
But it's Greta Gerwig. I believe in Greta Gerwig. So
okay, all right. Oppenheimer should be good.
Yeah, I think Barbie will be very subversive. I think that's where it will get it'll really get good. Is not just like doing a straight up adaptation of the character, but like showing how they can subvert it and kind of like critique the toys a little bit. And you know what else is coming up in August? The Meg 2, The Trench. Big sharks.
I was gonna say Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, but okay.
Yeah. See, we're both getting like guilty pleasure movies in August.
Definitely not guilty about my fandom for Ninja Turtles. No guilt at all.
Okay, just straight up pleasure then.
Yes, lots of pleasure.
So, yes, thank you so much for listening. My name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Extra Buttery podcast is written, recorded, and produced by Jason Chen and Robert Snow. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to rate and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. And remember, popcorn is always better with extra butter.